All right, folks, welcome back to part 2 of my front drive shaft disassembly and reassembly series, I guess you want to call it. It was all recorded in one take, but it just turned out to be too long, so it got cut in half. If you didn't see part 1, that's where I disassembled the drive shaft. I took all the U-joints out. I disassembled the CV joint at the upper end of the drive shaft, and I showed you some of the inner workings of how that worked and how to disassemble everything. If that's what you're looking for, then look back for part 1. I'll link it at the top of the video here somewhere, and then you can go see how it was that I disassembled the drive shaft. In this video, we're going to be reassembling the drive shaft, and I'm going to be sharing some of my woes on finding the right U-joints, which I didn't think was going to be difficult, and it turned out, I don't know, maybe the folks at my local Advanced Auto Parts just aren't all that bright. I don't know. I ended up with the wrong U-joints twice, but I'll cover that in just a minute in the video. Thanks for watching, folks. Okay, folks. After not one, but 2 trips to Advanced Auto, I now believe I have the right U-joints. So you'll see where I cut off yesterday's video, that which is before I changed my shirt. I was trying to fit the U-joints back in to show you how to reinstall them, and that wasn't going so well. The reason was I had the wrong U-joints, and that's because Advanced Auto, not once, but twice, sold me the wrong sized U-joint. I think what they sold me was the U-joint for the Rubicon drive shaft. I'm assuming it's got larger U-joints because the yoke on the 44 would be a larger yoke than on the 30. I'm guessing. I haven't looked up part numbers to verify this, but twice. So once, months ago, when I first bought these U-joints in preparation for this project, they sold me the wrong sized U-joints. And then when I took them back this morning to trade them in, they gave me the wrong sized U-joints. So now I have 3 U-joints, which are smaller and match the originals that I took out. I pulled the originals out, took them with me to Advanced Auto so that I could get the right U-joints. I've got 2 Moog, because that's what they had in stock, 280s, and 1 DriveWorks 369. Okay, and size-wise, they look identical. I don't know what the big difference is, but the grease fitting on this one is in the body, and the grease fitting on these is on the caps, which is good, because I don't think once they're in this universal, or once they're in this CV joint, that they would be greasable anymore. I don't think I'd be able to reach them if they're in the body on these. So I'm working on the end of the drive shaft that has the CV joint in it at the moment. So I'm going to work on putting that back together, and I'll show you guys how that's done. Now that you saw me how I took it apart. When I took it apart, I managed to booger this up a bit. You can see how this is no longer quite round. So I'm going to say that if you're following along with what I did in the beginning of this video, watch when I was taking out, I think, the upper U-joint in the CV joint, because I think that's where I damaged this. You'll remember, I think, that I found that putting, let me think, what was the right way I did it? The method that I used last that seemed to get the most purchase on those U-joints, you know, to get them out of there, I don't think was damaging this, but basically you just need to be careful. What I went and did now is I sort of tapped it back out with a screwdriver and a hammer, which might not have been the best tool, but it's what I have. And then I took a Dremel and I smoothed the inside of this out again, and it's close. I think it'll be close enough. I hope it'll be close enough. If not, I'm going to have to replace the whole drive shaft because this is part of the shaft. I don't predict that this shaft is going to be with me forever. Eventually, I'll probably replace it with a heavy-duty, you know, Tom Woods or something. I'm just hoping that gets me by long enough. So yeah, that's that. I'll grease this up really good when I put it back together, and I'll show you that when I get there. So for now, let's get the U-joints back in. So I'm going to take one of the CV-sized U-joints, and these are, I got to say, that these Moog joints look so much nicer than the DriveWorks joints. If you are not on a tight budget, they're like, I think they were like twice the price, which is why I went with the DriveWorks originally. But they're so much nicer. They're packaged nicer. They look just nicer. I don't know. So I'm not upset that these are ending up in the CV, because the CV is the hardest one to take apart. So I don't know if it matters, but you'll see that the number is stamped on the same arm of the U-joint that the Zerk fitting is going to go into. So I'm going to try to maintain that. I don't know that, again, I don't know that it matters. Take the 4 caps off. Okay, put them there. These don't take nearly as much force to put in as they did to take out, so that's handy. So what we do is we take one of the caps and we get it in place, and then we take this and we put it in by going up above it and then back down into it. Now, the one thing you need to be absolutely careful of is that you don't knock over any of those needle bearings while you're doing this. Okay, once that's together, I basically take the shaft out of the vise, which I should have done. See, that's together inside of there. Make sure this is nice and straight. All right, put it on a flat surface like this, and basically tap it until it seats in there. I'm tapping left-handed, which isn't usually my... So it's not far in, but it's seated. Now it is a little off. I think I'll fix that as it goes in. In fact, maybe I can tap it on the top here to fix it. Yeah, it's about as straight as it's going to get, I think. Okay. Now, you could just put this in the vise and push it in some more, because basically you're going to have to do the same thing on the other side, but you have to be careful of those needle bearings. So, again, this is where a press comes in handy. This does the trick, you can see, but it's a little more work. You might say it's a lot more work. But the goal is simply to get it flush with the outer ear here. Once it's there, then you can put the other cap in, the other side. And that's relatively easy because you've already got a piece of brass from my brass hammer in there. I don't want to leave that in there. Let's see, is that the end with the number? No, this is the one with the number. So we don't want the Zerk fitting yet. Basically, you'll take the joint, which is now set on the other side, move it out so that you can engage the pins in, or the needles, before it goes in. And then you just sort of tap it in there. You should end up with is the U-joint is seated. Feels about right, I think. And then you press it in, same way you did on the other side. Now, you should be able to move this back and forth. I can't. That sort of concerns me. I think we have needle bearings out of whack. Don't like that. Not working like I want it to. There we go. Okay. Well, the needle bearings look okay. I don't know why it wasn't seating properly. Seems fine. That seems centered. Nope, everything looks fine. False alarm, I suppose. Should be able to press this straight in with the vise now. There we go. Right where it should. Okay. Now, we have to take the caps and move them in just far enough to get the clips in. I've found there's a couple ways you could do that. One is you could take a socket or something, put it on top of this, and then use the vise. Or I found that the curved end of a ball-peen hammer usually does the trick. You just need to be careful, because it's not brass. Get it in just far enough. If you can see the ridge, that's what you have to clear. Once you have it in far enough to clear that ridge, then you can put the snap ring in, or the ring. And you'll see there's still a bit of gap there, so I can push the other end in. Let's see if we can get our ring in. Okay, now there'll be a special ring in here for, or clip I should say, for the end with the fitting. And that's because when it goes on here, this will block the fitting and this won't. Okay? So we'll save that for when we get that far. So this is going to go in next. Goes in the same way, well, roughly the same way it came out, as soon as I find my pliers. Basically, you take your needles and you squeeze it inward, and it goes right in. Ta-da! One ring. Now, we do the same thing on the other side. That ring is seated well, so we can't push this too far through. So pretty much tap. Looks about right. Okay, once this is greased, it should move nicely. I did not have this problem, but what I'm going to tell you about is if you cannot seem to get this in far enough, after you got the one clip in, the other cap just will not go in far enough to seat. And I mean like that much thickness, or the thickness of, say, one of these greasy little needle bearings. That means that one of your needle bearings probably fell over and is laying at the bottom of your cap. And that, unfortunately, means you have to disassemble the whole thing, get the caps off, and inspect. It's a pain in the butt, but it is the only solution at that point. Basically, if you don't, the cap won't seat right, period. Just won't. And if the cap won't seat right, you can't use the U-joint. Now, I usually do this on the second one I install, just to be dang certain this clip is seated. It looks fine, but I just like to be safe. Okay, and that's one end of the U-joint installed. Now, the trickier part is this thing, okay? So remember we had this all to disassemble, and then this went on. I'm almost certain, yeah, there's my mark. Remember I said about keeping it balanced, and I had marked the one side. Well, all the beading and whatnot, the marks are gone. I'm almost certain that this went on the side that did not have the weights on it. So you basically do the same thing we just did, except you'll use the other two caps. And now you'll have this to deal with instead of the drive shaft, right? It's not that bad. But basically, what we'll do is take the end that does not have the stamped number in it, which seems to be this end. So we'll use the one with the, see, that's the hole for the Zerk fitting. That's what I was talking about. Okay, so we take this, we try to assemble it, okay? So we put the U-joint through it, put the cap onto the U-joint carefully, and then the thing is together. I gotta take it back out of the vise without dropping the whole thing. Probably didn't need to put it in the vise to begin with, but I did. Now, the goal here is to get it seated into this thing. So now we can tap that with the hammer. Okay, that should seat it. We're going to have a look. Okay, it's seated. Do the same thing with the vise, pressing it in here without it falling out of here. Okay, now I got to put the cap in the other end. Remember, this does not have the Zerk fitting in it. It's not the end with the number stamped in it. Again, I don't know if that matters, but I'm being cautious. So, again, we just move this up, get it to, yeah, get it to mate with the needle bearings as best we can. It's not going to happen, is it? Can't go up far enough. Don't like that. Don't like that. Hang on. We do this, but we did it like this, didn't we? What I'm not liking here is exactly what I was just telling you about. It feels like it's not seated all the way, and that makes me think there's a needle bearing laying down. This is an unfortunate evil you have to deal with when doing these things. So, try to tap it back out of there. Hopefully it doesn't give me too much trouble. It's just about all the way out. Yep. If you have a look down in there, you see all the needle bearings have fallen over. Somewhere in my monkeying around with it, the needle bearings fell. Hopefully I didn't damage any of them in the meantime. Now what I need to go do is get my pick and straighten them out. Apparently the last time I used my picks, I didn't put the straight one away, and now I can't find it. So, gotta make do with this here curvy one. And that's okay, because it seems to be doing the job. All it takes is for one of these needle bearings to be laying down, and the joint will not go together properly. I have spent, one time, I was down in New Jersey working on my Jeep with a friend who lived there, and we pulled the front drive shaft out, and we didn't catch the U-joint, and we weren't replacing U-joints that day. We were, for the drive shaft, or maybe it was the rear drive shaft, whichever. The drive shaft was coming out for unrelated reasons, and I think we were doing an axle swap or something. And one of the caps falls off, and needles fall all over the driveway. And, well, we'll just say that it was not a good time. I ended up spending an hour or so in his kitchen with the toothpick from my pocket knife, which I never used again as a toothpick, picking needle bearings up from the center of the cap and putting them to the outer edge, like I just did now in 2 minutes. You can see now it's nice and solid. So now we got to try this again. Okay, this is the cap with the thing in it. So we need the end with the pressed in number. There it is. Dang, I tell you. Okay, so the goal here is to do this time without losing any freaking needle bearings. Which is hard to do, I'm going to say, because you can't see what you're doing while you're doing it. while you're seating it. Now I've got to get the other cap on. I'm just glad I noticed that before we had the other cap in, because then it would have been a real pain in the butt. Okay, now we got to try to get this cap in without messing up its needle bearings. This should be fun. What we can do is move this out just enough that it doesn't disengage those needle bearings, but it will engage these. Okay. Okay, well, at this point we should be able to go back and forth. Seats all the way, seats all the way. Yes, we're good. I don't know if you can see what I did there. Okay, you should be able to see this. You see how there's gaps on either side there. One over there, one over there. See how that seats all the way in? And over here, seats all the way in. That means that there's no trapped needle bearings. Okay, now we should be able to tap these in, and we should be good to go. Remember, just far enough. One time I had a needle bearing fall over as I was putting a U-joint in, and I didn't realize what was going on soon enough. And I was just like, why won't this seat? And I'm pounding on it, pounding on it, pounding on it. Finally, I took it apart to see what the hell was going on. And not only was there a needle bearing that had fallen over in there, it had fallen over and been cut practically in two by all the force. Moment of truth, if both clips fit, then you got it together properly. Sure looks like they're going to fit. Okay, now this one you can see is trickier because there's less to grab onto with these things. I don't know if there are special pliers for this, like snap ring pliers, but needles have always served me well enough. I can't recall a time that I've ever sent one of these flying across the garage or anything. Sometimes you'll have it do this where it's half seated, and then you just sort of tap it down with a screwdriver, and it should go right in place. And then, like I said, I tap it around the outer edge to make sure it seats just right. Doesn't look like it's seating just right. It's very close though. It's not like needle bearing width. It's just not quite seated width. The heck's all over my screwdriver. Now we're getting it. There we go. Now it's seated. It's probably that there's some crud in the rim there that was keeping it from seating all the way. Okay, now we need to reassemble this center yoke. Okay. U-joint, it's a little stiff, but it's also not greased yet. Remember that. The fitting, oh, that's weird. Let's tap that back in a little bit. That's better. Okay, this guy. And this guy. Just sat in there just like that, and then this spring went in here. You know, this is the part that's tricky. Okay. Okay, this has this like ball to it. This sits in that cup that I said I had damaged and I had cleaned up. I don't want to hit it with too much brake clean, but I do want to clean it off a little. I don't want to get inside in the needle bearings there. I'm going to cover that up with my finger. It's probably not the right way to do this. Don't get brake cleaning your eyes, folks. It's a bad idea. Okay. I'm just going to wipe this off a bit. What I'm going to do is squirt some grease down in there before I reassemble all this. Just because this is really, it's not a greasable, yeah, there's no place to put grease in. It's not a greasable assembly. So, we're going to hit some grease in there. We're going to get some grease in here. Right back. Grease gun. Yes, I sing to my tools, folks. Okay. I'm sure there are cleaner ways to do this, but I just squirt some grease onto my finger, plop it down in here. Says I could just squirt some down in there, huh? Okay, I could probably get around the outside of this a little more. I could probably clean it a little better too. It's looking pretty terrible. Now some people I've seen, I watched a couple YouTube videos before I made this one. One, to double check my procedure, which was exactly as I had remembered it. And two, to see if anybody had a decent video before I made this one. There are plenty of decent videos out there, but I just figured one more might help somebody out. So here I am. But anyway, I saw another guy, he had done all this, and when he got the thing disassembled, he found that all the needle bearings inside of there were just powder. Mine's looking pretty good, as you can see in there, and that makes me feel okay. I'm going to get a little more grease in there, just because. Not much, just sort of enough, right? So that it adds a little grease to the mess in there. This little spring that I took out, I'm going to put right back in the middle here. It fits into the center of that post. And then this just slides right back on here. Again, being careful not to booger up those needle bearings. And it's kind of spring-loaded. That's what that spring's for. That's how you get the play to get the U-joint in and out. Okay? I'm going to show you how that works, because this, getting this last cap in is almost a nightmare. I'm going to try to show you a couple tricks to make that work. Hopefully my tricks aren't too old to work anymore. I'm just cleaning out where the U-joint sits in this yoke so that I don't have too much to fight with clearance-wise. Okay, so that's that. Now this end works just like the other side did. We got to get the U-joint situated and get it in here. Okay, I'm going to put the fitting, this is the grease fitting, here because the other one's here. Again, I don't know that it matters, but it seems from a balance perspective that seems like a good idea to me. Okay, this is the grease fitting for the one we already installed. I'll put them in when I'm completely done. This one looks a little bit different. In this case, there's no stamped number there. It's okay though. Let's make sure it looks like it's the right size after all the fun I've had. Yes, it does. So if you're reading the number, the fitting went there. So I'm going to put the fitting here. So that's where I'm going to put that one. Writing's going to go that way. Okay. Excuse me. This is how this lays in here. Get the one with the fitting. Sorry if you can't see me, but me getting this in here right is more important. I'm sorry. Okay. There it is. Now we're going to tap it in there a bit. Because they're lined up. What's in my way now? Jesus. I need a bigger workspace. If you guys were to give me some money on Patreon, I could afford a better workbench. How's that sound? Okay. I'll make this go as easy as possible by putting some of that liquid wrench on there. Something ain't right there. Something feels off. Yeah, I don't like that. And tap this cap back out just to be sure. I don't like how that feels. Now that it's covered in liquid wrench, it ought to be nice and easy to do, right? Or not. I think it came a little bit. Keep going. There we go. It felt like, so sometimes the shoulder, okay, that side's still good. Sometimes the shoulder, or whatever, the post that comes out of the U-joint, will get onto the top of the needle bearings. And then that's just enough. What happened to the camera? The battery died, didn't it? You bugger. Hi folks, the battery died. Give me a minute. Fighting with my gear is always fun. Am I still recording sound? Yes, I am. You guys get to hear me mutter to myself. And trip over things. Yes, this is fun. This whole project, guys, fraught with peril. I'm coming. I'm coming back. I need an outlet. Power. And we're back. Ay, ay, ay. I tell you guys, this whole project has been a nightmare. Okay. So what I was trying to say when, I don't know when the camera fell, but this cap wasn't pushing in the way I expected it to. See how the needle bearings have sort of a ridge to the outside of them. Sometimes the post of the U-joint will get right on the edge of those needles. And you've got a chance that the needle will, instead of getting into place, buckle and bend inward, and that's obviously not what you want to have happen. In this case, it doesn't seem to be what happened. I was just being extra paranoid, but sometimes that's what you got to do when you're dealing with U-joints, guys. You just need to, if things aren't feeling perfect, you need to disassemble and reassemble. Otherwise, you end up ruining a brand new U-joint, and that is not what you want. Okay, let's try to get this just right. There we go. This feels so much better. Last time there was just pressure where I didn't think there should be. And, well, better safe than another trip to Advance Auto. That's what I always say. Now, I'm going to put my ball peen hammer. Tap the ends in and get the clips in. At this point, I'm really anxious for this project to be over, folks, if you can't tell. Once this clip is in, the hard part, I hesitate to say this, the hard part is essentially done. The next part is tricky, but not necessarily hard. The reason I'm extra safe with these clips, I've never had one pop out on me, but they are the only thing holding that cap in place. So to me, that makes them what you might call, or what we call in the IT industry, a single point of failure. So, usually when you have a single point of failure, you deal with that by being damn sure that it's in the best shape it can be in. And that's basically what I'm doing there. Okay, now to get these in, one side will be easy. Rock the whole thing over to one side, push the yoke down. The cap should basically slide right on, and you have half of the joint installed, just like that. Okay? Not quite centered. There. And you can't see it from the camera, but here. You can see that cap. There's this little lip right here that holds it in place. The yoke on the transfer case goes on the other side of this and also has a lip like that, and then this gets bolted on, and that cap's not going anywhere. What we have to deal with now is this cap. So the way to do that is you have to deal with there's just enough clearance with the spring in this yoke to slide this cap on, and then the spring holds this back up in place. Here, you can see better this way. See how there's just enough clearance there? You'll see once I get the screwdriver in there. That's what you do, is basically, just like I took it out, how I use screwdrivers to sort of move the joint and the yoke apart. I don't want to get metal filings in there. They're all over the screwdriver now. You do that, and then you slide your cap on. But you can imagine doing that and dealing with the needle bearings is a little tricky. So what I'm going to do is try to no. You also don't want to damage the other caps on the yoke while you're working on this. It's not enough. Sometimes you take one on either side, like this. Sometimes what you need is a third person, or second person. You're not quite right. You have to get the thing positioned just right to get this in here. It's not easy. Let's see. Yeah. Bet if I tap that on a little bit, it goes right on. Okay, now it's not quite right. It's not quite seated. Now it is. There you have it. Now again, this looks like it's really difficult to move, but it'll all get nice and broken in once we have everything. Yeah, there we go. See that? There. That's how this should move. Now we'll oil it up, or we'll grease it up really good. Let's get the fittings on it now. These 2 clips won't be used because of this, so we will have extra clips. You can save those as spares or whatever you want to do. You will find the first time you work on a U-joint, you may lose or break a clip, just because they're such a pain in the butt to deal with. Now these you basically thread in, start them by hand so you don't cross thread them or something. And then just a flat-headed screwdriver, they get put right in there. Make them snug. You don't have to wrench, really crank on them. If one did come out, you can replace them easily enough. You can buy bags of these things. Now the other end of the drive shaft is just a standard U-joint, and I've pretty much showed you how that goes together. The first joint we put in is basically the exact same procedure. You get one cap on, or one cap started, you put the joint through it to hold the needle bearings in place, and then you tap it into place, or use the vise to put it in place. Then you move the joint over to engage the bearings on the opposite end's cap. Right? So, I mean, I literally just did this with you twice. You put one cap in, you hold it in place, take the joint, put it through till it hits the needle bearings, and then you use the vise to press this end in so that it's flush with this. Then you take the other cap and hold it in place, slide the body of the universal joint over so it engages the bearings on that end. You know, same way, use the vise to press that in. Then you tap them in and get the clips in. Simple as that. I'm not going to show you another one because I've already done that several times. That dual cardan CV style end is the tricky end, and it's together now. The same principles I just showed you work on this end too. So that's pretty much it, guys. I'm going to end this recording right now, and I will then pick up when it's all back together, back in the Jeep for a close. All right, folks, there you have it. 3 U-joints in one CV style dual cardan whatever front drive shaft on a Jeep Wrangler TJ or LJ. Things I've learned on this project. One, you have to drop the belly pan to get to the transfer case end of the drive shaft on the TJ. That was kind of a pain in the butt. 2, when you do that, it's going to make you want to clean the frame, and it's going to make you want to clean up the belly pan, which I did. Look how clean it is now. I cleaned that thing up, wire wheeled it. It had lots of surface rust on it, and painted it with Rust-Oleum hammered, dusted it with some purple the same way I did the rocker guards because the Jeep has lots of purple in it, and what the hell, judge me if you want. Plus the kids love it. Anyway, also made me want to clean up the frame rails where the thing mounts because they had a bunch of mud caked up in there and a bunch of flaky rust, which I cleaned off. Frame's still good and solid, so I'm happy about that. But that's all cleaned up now, waiting for the paint to dry before I put the belly pan back on, and then this project will be done. Also, the U-joints that are in the computer at Advance Auto, I believe, are for the Rubicon and not for the standard Sport and Limiteds and whatnot, the non-Rubicon models, because the U-joints are too big if you just walk out of there with whatever U-joints they hand you. The smaller U-joints that come, the 1310 style yoke U-joints that come with the Sport Dana 30 worked perfectly. As soon as I had the right joints, everything went together just like you'd expect it to. Hopefully this video has helped teach folks how to disassemble and reassemble the CV joint at the upper end of both the front and rear drive shafts, depending on what model you have, what model vehicle you have, and whether you've replaced the drive shaft with an aftermarket shaft or not. First time I encountered one of those CV joints, I was baffled at how you were supposed to get it apart. And then I watched the guy take it apart in seconds because he had done 100 of them, similar to the way I just did with the screwdrivers where you pry up and then pull the one cap off and then you have all the play you need. It's like one of those logic puzzles you sit on your desk at work. But anyway, once you've done a couple of them, they're not too terrible. I mean, you saw me struggle a little bit, but that's only because it's been probably 10 years since I had one apart. Maybe longer, 15 years. It's been a while since I had a CV joint apart. Anyway, so yeah, that's it. Once the drive shaft was put back in, like I said, the belly pan can go back in. People recommend that you don't reuse the straps and bolts that come off of the Dana 30, so I want to mention that. I have reused them in the past, and for the moment, I'm going to reuse the ones that were on here because I didn't think ahead and buy new ones, and I need to get the Jeep back on the road. I'm going to recheck them after my first trip off-road, or at least the first 100, 200 miles or whatever, and make sure they're not coming loose, and I'm going to eventually get some new straps for those. I would recommend Loctiting them when you put them back in. Just don't use the red Loctite. They're hard enough to get out to begin with. All right, I think that about covers the front drive shaft. So thanks for watching, folks, and like I mentioned at the beginning, if you like what I do, please consider contributing to this endeavor via Patreon. Another good bit of news, the porch that we're working on is partially done now. That was done yesterday afternoon after I found out I didn't have the right U-joints. So there's progress on that front too. Yeah, I think that's everything. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe if you like the stuff I'm doing here. Yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.